I did some work with a company in Santa Rosa that did CO2 extractions. The top plate for the material column had, I want to say, 10 bolts. This guy took 7 of them off, went to lunch while the column was under pressure. So if somebody comes up and they only see 3 bolts up there, take the rest of them off. The plate went through the roof of the building, and the fire department found it a quarter mile away in an empty field.
One of the OGs in the cannabis extraction game, and used to own a cannabis absorbent and media company, if I read the Instagram bio correctly, right?
That's right. I started carbon chemistry with my brother.
Yes, carbon chemistry. I used their media way back in the day when I was doing some CRC, running an extraction lab in Detroit. So definitely excited to get into this. I guess, do you want to give a quick, brief introduction?
Sure, man. Oh boy. So I got into the cannabis industry after leaving the military. It was a kind of like Weed for Warriors, all that kind of stuff was getting started, and I I realized that there was an opportunity to take my technical background and mix it with what I was using for my healthcare and do some good stuff. And this was right about the time closed loop was literally just coming out. I mean, if you bought a Bogart system, you went to their backyard and learned how to make it. Learn how to use it in San Jose. They were listed on Craigslist, stuff like that. So it was early days, and got the opportunity to mess around with early ETS systems and really learn about filtration, things like that. And I didn't have a deep network for in the cannabis industry when it came to getting material and things like that. So kind of went a different direction and decided to, the stereotypical thing is like, in a gold rush, you sell picks and shovels or whatever. So kind of went that direction and started digging in deep on what people need in order to have successful extractions, better looking and better smelling, safer, removing pesticides, heavy metals. Just went down a deep rabbit hole there. Started off helping people clean up their distillate, and people started putting our media in columns. And CRC was kind of born out of the catalog of things that we had made available. People had tried putting activated carbon and stuff in there, but it's where we found out that clays and silicates and stuff like that are very effective. So moved from California to Colorado. That's where carbon chemistry kind of had its roots. We had the idea going and really blossomed in Colorado, and so I'm doing different stuff now, but that's kind of the lead up.
Nice. So when you say CRC, I guess we'll define that for the viewers. Color remediation chromatography, correct?
Yeah, I'm trying to push an alternative terminology, and that's
Okay.
active filtration.
I like that a lot more.
Especially if you spend any time around chromatography, what we're doing,
Right.
makes a lab chemist cringe.
Yeah, and the scale's so different. I always
Yeah.
found CRC interesting because it seems like the industry almost took a negative notion to it. And for me, I never understood that because I remember the days, at least in Michigan, when we were marketing winterized BHO, and like the winterization column was considered a value add or marketing term. And all that is just coffee filters basically. And you have a really cold column to precipitate out your lipids, and if it even really does come out in theory. But I just saw kind of CRC as just an extension of that. And to me, it was just pulling additional unwanted compounds out of your extract. But why do you think the industry almost took it as a negative?
Oh, I'll tell you. One of the things I had to take a 2 to 3 year hiatus from the industry to kind of rebalance myself, and part of that is the amount of social media fighting, the amount of peacocking, the amount of. I mean, for smaller operators, sometimes making a splash will get you a level of interaction that you wouldn't have been able to gain on your own. And so the CRC situation came from people saying, well, you're just taking your trash and you're polishing it so it looks like my live resin and stuff like that. And
Right.
they're not wrong. I mean, people were able to make basically like water clear looking, terp sauce and stuff like that from last year's trim. And part of that is showing off the effectiveness of the method, but another part of it is, people were kind of duping their customers by having some stuff on the top shelf that maybe shouldn't have been there. But fortunately, fortunately, the industry has moved on and learned a lot of other techniques. Seeing crystallization take off has been a big part of CRC not necessarily even being used that way anymore. So I think it was just a moment where there was kind of like a hashtag kitty litter or like hashtag polished turds, like what was the other one, Tide Pod Squad or something
Yep.
like that.
The hot
So
dog water.
the dog water, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I
Yeah,
always
so,
push back on that though, because to me, a molecule is a molecule. So if it's THC from shit trim or THC from good trim, it's still targeting one active compound, and that being THC. Sure, the shit product's not going to have the terpenes, but you could always reintegrate those.
yeah, I'm right there with you. There's a there's a big difference between the imagery that is produced for marketing and what we have to learn as processors in order to actually do the chemistry, understand the molecular interactions, separations, all that kind of stuff.
So what really got you interested then in starting a company around absorbance? I remember I was doing a little bit of research. I found a Future 4200 AMA, and it was like absorbance absorbed my mind. And that was kind of how you started this AMA thread. I found that I was like, oh, that's an interesting way to put it. But what really kind of interested or captivated you about absorbance and filter media?
So that's a good question. So we were selling we were selling butane as imperial gas, and so I was spending a lot of time in labs working with friends, associates, clients, and a lot of people at the time were really trying to clean up their distillate, and some of the odors that these people were producing in their distillate. I was just like, we gotta. Oh, and pesticides, myclo was a huge thing, right? So
Yep.
it kind of all hit at once, and I just went down the rabbit hole. It's been one of my main skill sets is I'll lock my teeth into something and start ripping into white papers, start going through NIH, start going through every AOCS, everything I can get my hands on, and started really making the connections between edible oil processing and what we were doing, because oleoresin chemistry just doesn't really have its own space. People would say, "Oh, we have a PhD chemist on our team," and it's like, all right, I know a guy with a high school education that knows more about cannabinoids than that guy
Right.
will in the next 3 years. So there was a lot of translation that had to be done between the different industries. It wasn't so easy as just, well, this is what they use on sunflower oil, we can use it on ours. Certain things had to be dialed in. We didn't really understand pH as well back then, and how it affects the plant and crystallization and color, stuff like that. So once I started going down that rabbit hole, and just little nuggets would pop out, and I would get to kind of use some of my clients, I guess you could say, work with them to get some of these products, get them in, which getting a small amount of certain activated clays is a feat in and of itself. If you're not buying by the truckload, they don't want to talk to you, because it's like, would they rather deal with somebody in this industry that in 2014 was still highly illegal in most places, or would you rather sell, a train car worth of this clay to a sunflower, corn oil producer, soybean oil producer? So I was so low on the totem pole, it didn't exist. And fortunately for me, I was able to get some of the companies to give me samples, and some of the results I started seeing was like, hey man, we're onto something.
Nice. So, how did you get around those early hurdles then? I'm sure there was many of them starting out in the illegal side of the industry, and kind of like you had mentioned, just even getting your foot in the door. I know even on the legal side is tough. I could only imagine back then.
You talking about with the manufacturers of the products like the clays and silicates?
Yeah, yeah.
So it was interesting. I kind of came at it in two different directions. One, I joined the American Oil Chemist Society and ACS as well. Uh, Kind of went to where they were, went to their conventions, started having conversations with sales reps and people that would give me a chance. Usually, large organizations will have a business development manager or apprentice. They'll give that category towards somebody, and you show up with a new industry, and you kind of catch their ear if you know how to sell it right.
Okay. So, did you have any other hurdles kind of starting carbon chemistry then in those early days?
Well, first of all, the name carbon chemistry is kind of tongue in cheek, as I'm sure you might be aware. You could just call it organic chemistry if you wanted
Right.
to see. So, and then of course our symbol was a benzene ring, which a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people weren't exactly super happy about, but it looks cool. So,
Yep.
yeah, the first initial challenge was convincing people to put dirt in thousands of dollars worth of distillate. That was fun. You've got somebody with a boiling flask. It's got 2-3 liters of distillate at a time, where liters of disti were going for like 15,000,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
And you're like, all right, I need you to take this scoop of clay and put it in there, and hopefully we can get it all back out, and all that kind of stuff. So many challenges, so many different things to work at. But I had people who were either desperate for solutions or willing to take a shot on having a market edge, and they gave me the opportunity to get in the game and create new capabilities for our industry. And that's been a huge thing for me, is that this job's tough enough as it is, and there's not really a whole lot of support, whether that's education or professional development. The way I was able to interact with people, the way that they helped me, the way I was able to help them, that infrastructure, that community development has been part of my game from the beginning.
Oh yeah, I remember learning everything just through like Future 4200 and the YouTube University. There wasn't really much to pick from.
So, yeah, that was that forum started in my car. Dustin and I were driving away from a CBD convention in Colorado, and he said, "I'm thinking about starting a forum."
Wow.
Well, it's a great idea. I think I'm member number 13, because it took me a while to get back to my computer and sign up. And that community is great. It's also a wonderful snapshot of the way that we beat the heck out of each other. I was just telling my son-in-law just the other day, I was like, nobody kicks a welder's ass more than other welders, and we're very similar in that way.
Yep.
Somebody says, "Hey, I just figured out how to make water clear distillate," and somebody says, "You're full of shit. You're lying." That's, whatever. I mean,
right.
Somebody always has something to say, and so the forum unfortunately became a battleground for certain things. But at the same time, there's a humongous amount of information that somebody can get seriously, like a graduate level education in cannabis from scooting through there.
Oh, easily. So like, take me back to the early days, like R&D and playing around with different clays, seeing kind of what worked, what didn't. What was that like, and what was that process?
So the first clay that I got was T41, and I also got magnesium silicate for pesticides. The magnesium silicate angle is based on an EPA method for pulling pesticides out of wastewater, and so it uses fluorosil, uses hydrocarbons. I think at the time they were using hexane or something like that. So we're just following that method for pesticides. T41 is used for bleaching edible oils, and it's very acidic, right? Anybody that's familiar with using it, you apply heat to a cannabinoid solution while you have T41 in there, and congratulations, you accidentally started the D8 industry.
Right, I remember that, the zeolite conversions.
Right. Well, any microporous absorbent is going to give you that, especially if you have a low pH environment. And then, of course, we found out later high pH environments have their own thing. Purple oils would come out, from having have it go over, gain a relative pH of 9. All of a sudden, that changes a lot of things and creates new interactions. But so T41 was first, and that was mostly for color. So people were having dark, smelly distillate, and T41 is an engineered clay that has a acidic profile. But then they do a special technique where they grind up activated carbon to the same particle size as the clay, and so they stay together. Normally, they would separate during transportation, and that's why it's very hard to find a comparable product. I think the MB41 or whatever Media Bros calls it is a good solution to that, because they use a larger grain size with the granular carbon, granular clay. You can simulate that effect without the technology that the clay manufacturer had to go through. It turns out they were destroying their grinders trying to get the activated carbon and clay to match up in particle size.
Wow.
So that was the first one, and it was getting results. People were getting lighter distillate. But then the pH modification started to show its head. People would be like, "I'm losing yield." Well, that's because people didn't have D8 standards in their analysis. So
right.
The THC just disappears, and it wasn't until they started looking at peaks that they realized, like, oh, we still have something in there.
Right.
That D8 became a target. But T5 was the neutral pH clay that took its place and has been the backbone of a lot of things for, God, almost 10 years now. I
Okay.
think Carbon Chemistry as a corporation dates back to 2017, but these projects date back to late 2014, 2015, somewhere in there.
Okay. Now take me through kind of like the science of how these clays work, because from my little limited understanding on it, they kind of act almost like magnets, and based on polarity or different intermolecular forces, they'll attract different kind of contaminants as opposed to other filtration styles like a size exclusion filter would be like an example of a coffee filter or something like that.
Right. So you mentioned a lot of it, and that's one of the reasons why I prefer people using the term active filtration. Right, we're setting our targets and we're developing our systems for the targets that we're going after. And the complexity there is that, for example, heavy metals are going to be an ionic interaction. They're going to be attracted to the clay because of the difference in charge. Um, there's porous structure, so that's going to be absorption. Uh, One of the benefits of activated carbon is that it has micro, small,
But
medium, and large size pore channels, so you can capture different size molecular structures. Unfortunately, there's no way to tune the system, so that's why people will get their THC caught in
okay.
activated carbon times. Clay is very interesting. So I like to tell people that under a microscope, activated clay looks like lasagna,
Okay.
lots of sheets, and when they say that it's engineered or acid activated, it doesn't mean that it's acidic necessarily. It means that they've put it in an acid bath and the clay structure swells and there's space in between those sheets, and so now you're getting physical filtration and some size exclusion capability, as well as pH modification, ionic charge, all that kind of stuff. So everything you mentioned, we're going after all of it, and each absorbent has a different quality there. Like uh, magnesium silicate really loves to attract chlorine and fluorinated pesticides, as well as destroying pesticides in general just through the pH change. Right. So your silica gel and alumina are going to have different targets, especially partially polar compounds. But they also have a shape that creates a very high flow environment. So silica and alumina are usually the bottom of the bed because once everything gets there, it's going to get through safely without a huge amount of channeling.
Okay. So, do you really see kind of the industry still utilizing active filtration? Because I know, at least in the Michigan market, you don't really see people marketing CRC like they used to. I know that's partially because the industry or the consumers are anti CRC. But I'm curious, like, is there still a use for this in current market? And if so, like, what does it really look like?
Well, you're seeing a huge difference between things being marketed as having had CRC performed on it and whether or not CRC is being done. Uh,
Okay.
you're, you're not seeing the technique marketed because it's standard. The technique is ubiquitous. People don't necessarily need it. If you're in an environment, say in the Northeast, where all of your material is fresh, you can just you go straight to live resin. But if you have any winterization needs, you were talking about
Yeah.
early winterization. Uh, Alumina is a quiet hero of winterization. It grabs lipids. It provides clarity. Things that physical filtration, lenticular filtration can't necessarily do on their own. So
Okay.
so you're seeing the technique still be used in labs all across the country, but it's not a sales technique. Marketing a product as CRC doesn't provide a value the way that it might have, say, you know, 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay, I was gonna say yeah, and even I feel like I don't even see those bright white extracts anymore. That was kind of indicative of that color remediation and just stripping any bit of pigment out of it. It's interesting how the markets kind of evolve like that. Where do you see the future of active filtration going? Is there any like big improvements on the horizon or stuff that people maybe a lab manager should be on the lookout for?
So I was pulled out of retirement by Lex Shantz from Solvent Direct.
Oh, Lex is awesome.
Lex is great. His work ethic, his attitude towards the industry is second to none. I mean, he's an intense fellow for sure, but he got me hooked with his attitude, and he was just like, man, the industry can still use you, needs you, and he has a focus on making sure that people have what they need, right? So at first some people were finding it kind of ironic that I was promoting Chemtech products or Media Bros or whatever, but with the Solvent Direct team, the idea is do whatever it takes, make sure people have what they need, and in that regard, the point that we're at in the industry right now is scale, right? Being able to get enough material that you can process all of the biomass that you're going through, making sure that you're not waiting on delivery, that the logistics supply chain is smooth, that you can get large volumes of the materials that you need, and you're going to have repeatable results, right? So that's been somewhat of a challenge. We're not really dealing as much with little 5 kilogram buckets. It's a lot more barrels and super sacks and truckloads and things like that. And getting being able to service that scale is a challenge, especially with companies that are nationwide, have distribution centers scattered throughout the country. So
Nice.
active filtration is here to stay. Some people use it, some people don't. At certain scales, it's necessary. At other scales, it's not required at all. But it's like saying, do you think vacuum distillation is going anywhere? It's
Right.
it's part of the industry.
Yep.
So if you need it, you need it. If you don't, you don't. It's cool. But it's a tool in your tool belt, and when it comes to like new developments, like say new products or whatever, it was interesting coming back after 2 or 3 years and seeing that the technology is almost identical to where I left.
Mm-hmm.
We went from every 6 months, if you hadn't caught up with the new wave, you were falling behind, to now I stopped paying attention for 2 years and came back, and we've plateaued in a way that's actually very beneficial. A mature industry grows slowly. Every now and then there will be a big leap or something like that, but a mature industry moves slowly, and that's a tough thing for a lot of people to deal with. It's extraction itself. So processing is one thing. There's a whole bunch of skill sets in processing, but extraction, unfortunately, as a lot of us saw, has become an hourly job for people that are almost at the lower end of the totem pole of skill set. If I want you to be managing a processing department, I need to know that you know extraction through and through, filtration, distillation, crystallization, packaging, bringing lot tracking, quarantine, pesticide analysis. I mean, there's so many angles, and it's one of the beauties of cannabis chemistry in general is that to work in this space as a processor, it's very multidisciplinary.
Certainly. Yep. What do you think would be kind of the key skills that you would say an extraction lab manager would have to have then, kind of listing off a couple of those? Is there one that kind of stands above the rest?
Oh boy. Project management is huge. I see a lot of guys that they're still in the extractor or distiller mindset when they get to that level. And you have to be able to go beyond that. You have to be able to translate from the guys who are working to the CFO, to your branch managers, to your distribution team, to your sales marketing team. You have to be able to translate what's going on. They might not necessarily know what it means when you have a backlog on solvent. It's like, yeah, that means we're not going to have product for, a week or something.
Taking almost like a lean manufacturing or Six Sigma approach to it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, those are killer skill sets. Knowing everything that's happening in your lab, but also being able to translate that into a product for the people that you work for is important.
Okay. So, I guess, I don't know. You reached out to me on Instagram, and I kind of want to like almost go into the side of like social media, and you see a lot of like lab techs on social media starting off nowadays. What would you say about like the importance of networking or personal branding when it comes to social media and just cultivating that extractor network? Coming from the early days of like Future 4200, the community was big and everything, so I could always just echo the importance of it. But I'm curious your thoughts on like leveraging Instagram or different forums to kind of either get education or have conversations like this, pick different people's brains. What's your thoughts on that?
Oh man, well, it's Instagram in particular was my tool that helped me access the rest of the country. whether it was hashtags, whether it was being in certain social circles where your posts are showing up, you're tagging people, you're part of a community. That can be huge because people start recognizing your handle. You know, when social media is the way that you interact with the industry, it's almost like being a special operator or something. You know, it's like the number of people who I've known for a decade now, and all I know is their Instagram handle. You know, oh hey, that's Khalifa Kid 420 or whatever. You know, and I don't know, his name's Brad or Alex or whatever. You know?
It is kind of interesting learning people just from the handle, like Dread Pirate, or I'd recognize
right,
the
yeah.
Shadownaught from back in the day.
Yeah, so that's part of the personal brand. Your social media is where you can show off your skill. I'm not a big fan of it in terms of professional development.
Okay.
I've lost accounts myself. I've had a situation where I lost all of my extraction photos from prior to 2015 because I can't remember exactly what happened, but my account was deleted and I lost all my pictures because I didn't save them on storage at the time. So there's possibility there that you lose your CV if it's social media based, and that's why I've made a couple of pushes to try to make professional organizations that help people like track the number of hours they've worked in the lab, the number of the types of machines they've worked on and stuff. But it's been an uphill battle. So in lieu of that, the best thing that somebody can do is to track that data. A basic idea of how much product you've produced, how much biomass you've gone through in certain time periods, types of machines you've worked on. Just squirrel it away. That way you can answer the questions.
Yeah. That's interesting. You bring that up because it was probably about a month ago. I was in an interview for a lab manager job, and they had asked, like, rough estimate, how much biomass have you processed? And I had no idea off the top of my head. Do you want to touch on those organizations real quick and maybe kind of like some of those hurdles that you're experiencing with them?
The problem has been I've tried to start organizations, filed for nonprofits, filed for industry associations, and then the partners I had got busy with other things.
Gotcha.
People who for 6 months it was a high priority, and then all of a sudden priorities changed. And so if somebody else was to create a professional organization like a 501c6 for the industry, I'd love to participate, but I burned the candles at both ends trying to get it started, and I just ended up getting burned myself. But something like that needs to happen, and in lieu of it, you just follow what somebody goes through in a professional track. Say if you're a carpenter or something, it's like an apprentice is going to have a year or two of experience, is going to have a certain number of hours in the lab, a certain number of technologies that they're capable of using, that they understand temperatures, vacuum depths, all that kind of stuff for different process. And then when I train somebody, I like to train them the way that it looks when it goes right. And then the next step is what it looks like when it goes wrong. And then the final step is what to do when you get hit with a surprise. You have a sudden leak, you have an unexpected result, how to troubleshoot and backtrack through your process to find out where you messed up. So yeah, I see that kind of as a progression. And if you can fill in data for each one of those steps, you're going to be leaps and bounds ahead of anybody else that you're competing against.
Yeah, I definitely like that framework. And there's certainly a lot of places that things can go wrong in the extraction lab. Do you have any good stories of extractions gone awry?
Oh God. I did some work with a company in Santa Rosa that did CO2 extractions.
Okay. And
the top plate for the material column had, I want to say 10 bolts. Oh. Each one of them was like the size of a lighter.
Yep.
Right. Fat bolts. And this guy took 7 of them off and then went to lunch while the column was under pressure.
Oh, geez.
So somebody comes up and they only see 3 bolts up there, take the rest of them off. The plate went through the roof of the building, and the fire department found it a quarter mile away in an empty field.
Jeez, that's crazy. A quarter mile away.
The guy had cuts like a salt shot from a shotgun, went up the side of his face. He's so lucky he didn't damage his eye or something like that. And so
I believe it.
Doing that, couple of brief, intense butane fires that, a butane fire is an interesting thing, right? It's a lot scarier than it is damaging sometimes. Yep. Right. And I mean, there's plenty of horror stories and stuff like that. But in smaller incidents, it's like
Yep.
quick type of situation, and
It almost burns before it can spread to anything else. So like it burns so quickly and so hot that it just doesn't have the chance to spread.
yeah, the real problem is going to be having other things around you that
Yep.
that are ignited, right? It's and every chemist has a horror story of working with hexane or pentane or something, So,
Yep.
but I've been pretty lucky. A lot of small accidents, right? Blow throughs on distillation. One of my favorites is there was a guy that was learning. He was learning how to use clay in distillation with Victor Suarez, Loud and Clear from Santa Rosa.
Okay.
I don't know if you're familiar.
No.
He was a larger than life character in Northern California, cannabis and the cannabis industry as a whole. And fortunately passed, but left a great legacy. And him and Photon Noir were really pushing the water clear technique. And so this guy was down there working with Victor, and we're still talking about liters being every single liter being enough to buy a lightly used car.
Yeah.
And this guy's walking around with 5 liters in a flask and trips and falls and breaks the whole thing. And it was like, yeah, you got
It's heartbreaking.
$50,000 on the ground, and it was something else. Hadn't seen that kind of lab accident at at that scale at the time.
Yeah.
I know in today's world it's a laughable laughable
a couple
thing.
hours worth of work.
yeah, exactly. But back then that was a tragedy. But no, I've been very lucky to be in well-crafted labs, and even the ones that aren't exactly following all the safety standards have done their best to protect their people or do what they need to do in order to stay away from major dangers.
That's good. I've certainly been in some labs where it was questionable and it was just a ticking time bomb. I'd tell them that, hey, you can produce up to a point where you're starting to only produce liabilities. Like,
right.
I mean, there was this one lab I worked with. They were pushing throughput so quickly where they were like, cut the passive extraction when the butane's down to like a quarter of the way on the botanical column, and we were pulling out socks with just pounds of liquid butane dripping out of it, just waiting for an explosion.
Probably don't have the correct outlets on the wall or anything like that.
Oh no, yeah, and it was just constantly fighting the C1D1 alarm, and it was. But the problem with that too is that rig was not set up correctly at all. It had no like condensing coil. A lot of their sizes and connections were just all off. A lot of bottlenecks on it, so they were getting squeezed on the throughput and just trying to push it way past capacity.
Yeah, I started off in a different era, I guess you could say.
When did you start off?
So glass tubes and butane cans was my game for quite a while. I finished my bachelor's and was posting a lot locally in Monterey, California about being interested in being a veteran advocate for cannabis access. Started going to community council meetings and things. This guy messages me out of nowhere and he's like, "Hey, you've got your degree now." He's like, "Would you like to be my production manager?" I'm like, "All right." He's like, "Yeah, we do a extraction operation. I think you might be interested." So I go, we have a conversation, and he's like, "All right, I think you're a good hire. Meet me here tomorrow at my house, and I'll take you to the facility." I'm like, "All right, cool." So I go to his house, and we go into a tough shed in the backyard.
Yep.
With a bunch of glass tubes held together with wood, and that was my life for a little while. And I think we got 6th place in the first Secret Cup, and
wow,
played our game there. But we used to have early closed loop extraction where you'd pick up the whole machine and put it in a bucket of water.
Yep.
And
the old Best Value Vax one.
Yeah, right. Best Value Vac. Hell, even the early Bogarts, Cali extractors, a whole bunch of them. But I worked in one place where we had carpet floors where we were doing that.
Nice.
So,
yeah. I mean, I remember my first lab that I ran, it was Pure Michigan Oil, and that was ran.
Oh yeah, rings a bell.
Yep. So that was ran out of the basically lab owner's basement, about 15 feet away from his water softener and water heater. We had 3 5-pound Best Value Vacs. Yeah. And we quickly moved out to the garage as soon as we could convince him to expand. But I was laughing because I still got my glass tube column over there, and
oh wow,
over in the back room in storage somewhere is my like 2-foot closed column pressure extractor. Back when you used to just pull a little vac on the column so you could get a little extra butane out of that can. But
I'm glad you saved that kind of stuff. I'd be really excited for somebody to make a almost like a museum of cannabis
That'd be
extraction. You
cool.
know, old Frenchy cannoli stuff. You know, showing hash balls, and
Yeah.
I mean, I was working with Ben from Delta Separations because the gas operation we were doing was in the same business park as Delta Sep, and I'd go over to Ben's office and we'd hang out. You know, maybe smoke one or whatever. And Frenchie came in and gave us a little one of those little washing machines, you know, for like an
Wow.
apartment, like in like a
Yep.
something you might see more of like in like Thailand or something. And he was like, I want to turn this into a hash washing machine, and that's kind of where the centrifuge game started.
That's crazy.
So it'd be really cool to see some of those early things displayed because I don't have any of my stuff, and I'm glad you do, you know, because it's important, I think.
I should grab it. It's on the bookshelf over there. It's still got the residue in it from not even
Okay.
being clean. But yeah, I mean, all that stuff, it was just kind of like I didn't really know what to do with it. So I just threw it in storage, moving from house to house. But I'm glad that I kept it.
It's it's one of those things, you know. It's kind of like when people have a shadow box from the military to show where they've been and what they've done. If you have if you have an understanding of how to use a glass tube in a commercial sense, then you've been around for a little while. And I always thought it would be funny to have an empty can with a sensor on the tip, and so people have to push the can onto a glass tube and just see how, you know, how, the arm strength to like
Yeah.
hold the tube up and hold the can in, and see what people were going through to make their extracts.
Oh yeah, and all the butane that you inhaled. I remember feeling so dizzy afterwards, or so just tired after a day's worth of work.
Going from trash can to trash can like a raccoon dumping off cans to you know, just hoping to God somebody didn't see you do it and follow you back to the spot and all
Yep.
that fun stuff.
Yeah, those were
Yeah,
fun
man,
days.
it's been interesting seeing where things are at now. I just was in Oklahoma, visited a couple places that absolutely blew my socks off. The scale was fantastic, and it's so funny. Some of these, like, you know, smaller states are almost they're almost jumping in midstream. They're not starting from scratch. So it's
Okay.
states like California, Oregon, Colorado don't necessarily have a technology advantage or even a skill set advantage. I see a lot of guys in Missouri, uh, Oklahoma, I mean, just the Arizona scene, the New Mexico scene, all that kind of stuff. You know, they were gaining people that had skills but didn't necessarily have a home, and so you've got people who are at the relatively front edge of extraction technology who are going to some of these states.
Well, that's good to
And
see.
yeah, you go to an operation and it's like, yeah, my state's only had medical for, you know, a handful of years. And meanwhile, their lab looks like exactly what you would expect if you walked into a mature industry, you know, a mature lab in a mature state that has had a decade of regulation.
Well, that's nice. We're all progressing together. It's not like there's one clear leader then. And it kind of makes sense because the knowledge has been kind of democratized and been able to spread.
Sure, you know, it's there's an old phrase that there's a battle between weapons and armor. The weapons get better, the armor gets better. The weapons get better, the armor gets better, and they chase each other back and forth through development. It's kind of similar with us, right? The farmer, the grower creates
I like that analogy.
the farmer creates varietals. The extractors try to do their best job to show the expression of that product as an extract. And sometimes the technology for the extractor advances, and an extractor will be in high desire, and then it'll swing back the other way. Where if you don't have such and such genetics, you're not hitting the top tier of profile.
Right.
So
It's almost like the extractor's job to showcase the art that the grower made or grew. And it almost kind of brings up a really good question is like you hear the term kind of thrown around extraction artist, and then you kind of see the industry moving more of a scientific manufacturing, like process oriented way. Do you think there still is kind of like that art aspect to the extraction room? Because to me, I always thought there was kind of like a little bit of an art to it, but you were balancing art, science, and technology. I'm curious what
yeah,
your thoughts are on that.
yeah, I kind of go back and forth with it. You know, I am from the extraction artist time period, but extraction technician is more appropriate, I suppose. But we get the art back where we make it, right? So in the early days in California, we had sort of a rule that if you put two different strains in a tube, the extractor was the one that got to pick the name of what came out. And so I've seen a lot. I was just at Oklahoma Cannabis Industry Association meeting there last week, and this guy was showing me some of his products, and he's even doing it with squish with solventless. He's like, yeah, we took these two different strains, and it was just cool seeing that tradition passed along. So there still is a little bit of artistry. Taste and smell are always going to be more of an artistic, subjective experience type of deal. So the sommelier type environment, or skill set, I guess you could say, that's always going to be there. We've had times where, at least for me and for some people, it's like everything kind of tastes the same. The hybrid genetics are all over the place. It's like get to a point where nothing really stands out for some lines and whatnot. And so finding ways to break that and seek out unique, I think, is important. And that is the art. That's where we're at. It's when it comes to extraction, we really are kind of like roughnecks in a way. You don't necessarily ask like what art is left in petroleum cracking, but for a petrochemical engineer, it's probably a lot of little parts of their job where it's like, there's a personal touch here, and that's why I'm the best, or that's why my company outperforms, or whatever. So
Okay.
It's not quite as romantic as it used to be, but there's still something there.
Yep. No, I definitely agree, because it almost is like that art is a smaller subset of the community now, and it's just kind of like you said, the people that are mixing strains at the artisanal level, offering us, product to a small subset of the consumer base. And then you have your petroleum is kind of like your distillate, where it is kind of like you're distilling off compounds of interest at different boiling points, no different than petroleum or oil. And depending on what that lab is looking to produce kind of dictates the mentality going into it. So definitely like that analogy there.
I think one area that has poked out to me lately as a realm for art is crystallization, which some chemists would say, even today, crystallization is an art.
No, I see it.
There's so many variables that how attuned you are to your process is going to matter almost more than the formula and the actual plan that you put together. So little things like challenging ourselves to see how clear the faces of our crystals can be, how many points, like little things like that, like you might see in the gemstone industry. There's some fun there. My buddy Jay Wood out there in Oklahoma, he's got a great thing that I'm sure a lot of people do now, but for me it was mind blowing 2, 3, 4 years ago, where he'd have a bucket full of THCA crystals and different mother liquor HTE fractions. Okay. And you got to choose your experience. So you would reach in and you'd grab a couple crystals that you liked, right? So you get to pick out the crystals. So now there's you're bringing back the human element, right? Because it's your subjective experience that chooses which crystals you want in your product, and then you get to smell every HTE fraction and maybe mix and match, create something new yourself. Stuff like that will never be a fully roboticized, scientifically captured experience, I don't think.
That's interesting. That would be fun to try. I never thought of doing something like that, but it would be actually really interesting and pretty easy to do.
Yeah, especially, I mean, as you're aware, I mean, crystallization's the end of the game. Like we've done it.
Right.
There's no new form of cannabis experience waiting around the corner when it comes to specific cannabinoids. Like you crystallized it, and you've got a mother liquor with all of the non-crystallizable compounds. Like, yeah, that's it. Like now you have to do something interesting with that. But I mean, there was a time, like I said, where every couple of months, it's like distillate came around, and people were like, how are they doing that? And then because we didn't necessarily have a big backgrounds in organic chemistry, and didn't realize this was something you learn so early on in the process. But then people start crystallizing, and it's like, this is what's the technique? And now we've got it. So So you
So
can do these fun experiences because the technology is out there.
yeah, so we've kind of like ran out of refinement techniques, and we keep getting more pure and pure every time, jumping from just like BHO extraction to super cold BHO extraction to limit the pigments and lipids. And then we have distillation coming in at like the mid 2000s, 2010 maybe. And then, like you said, crystallization. So we can't really go more pure. Now I'm kind of with you. The next horizon's formulations. How do we now integrate those pure compounds together in a way that you can almost make like a unique formula, and that's how you build your brand then.
Yeah, yeah, you're building the end user experience, because at the end of the day, you know, it doesn't matter. Like, so we used to have nucleation on our slabs when everybody wanted shatter,
Yep.
and we'd make sugar wax, and it was considered a failure. And the boss would be like, "Oh, god damn it!" He'd sell it for half price. He'd just ditch it. But I was always like, "It smells better. It tastes better. I like the effect." And it's just so funny that at certain periods of time, the thing that was coming next was seen as some sort of mistake in the previous process.
Yep.
So it's a subjective experience of what's best, and we're always following it. You know, and that whole story was basically what you think you need to do in order to produce. It doesn't matter if the end user wants something else, right? You're always chasing, like, the dispensaries, the distributors, the salespeople. They can sell customers to a certain extent, but at the end of the day, desire, um, the need from the actual customer base is important on what techniques we use.
No doubt. So with that being said, like what's your favorite consumption method or way to consume right now?
Uh, I've always been an oil guy. Like, not much of a flower consumer, but lately some of the carts have just been incredible. But I've just got a Puffco and some crystals that I smash up into some
Nice.
HTE is kind of that's my move. So
Okay. So no preference for like, I know a lot of people are moving towards the solvent list. Myself, I'm still on the old school live resin train.
well, I mean, live resin PHO, sure, but I don't know. I'm partial. I haven't delved into it, and I know that the solvent list game is so far beyond where I've paid attention to it. It was never really much of my focus because they didn't require very many of my
Makes sense.
skill sets. But there's just something about having potential cell walls and stuff in there that always made me feel like BHO was the
Yep.
cleaner product in some sort of ways. And I get people not wanting to have trace butane in their system, but usually the people that were telling me that were also smoking flower and, you know,
Well, and don't you get more
700
butane?
700 ppm every.
Exactly. Yeah. From a lighter hit, I was gonna say you get more butane from the lighter hit than you would a normal gram of concentrate. So I never really bought into that argument.
When you look at OSHA exposure limits, when you look at food safety and all that kind of stuff, look at other industries and what they hold their products to. We're we're like NASA level purity when it comes to our
Yep.
products. Like, fun little anecdote from that CBD company I worked at in Santa Rosa. They were trying to find regulations on ppm exposure of pesticides for cannabis, and the funny thing they were running into is that the only biomass that people smoke is tobacco.
Yep.
And so the only exposure limits for pesticides were lobbied and created by the tobacco industry.
Yep.
Nobody smokes broccoli, so it's like nobody smokes lettuce. I mean,
Yeah, it
well,
makes sense.
normal lettuce, salad lettuce, but so there was no frame of reference, and so their micro exposure was like single digit ppms. Their, you know, the urea content or whatever, all these
Yep.
things that we're allowed to get away with were lobbied by that industry. So states having things like 500 ppm, hell, even 50 ppm for a little while of butane, like, it's an incredible standard to hold oneself to, and other industries just don't have to deal with that.
Yep.
But
Awesome. Is there anything
yeah,
you?
uh, I saw you post something about pesticides recently.
What was it? Because I think I'm
It
trying to
was like
remember.
it was something about analytical chemistry. I think you might have come back from Canacan, or I think it was like an ACS thing. But
Yeah, it was. recently in Georgia for the ACS cannabis kind of expo, just presenting different research.
That's what it was. And there was something that you had come across with pesticides, and it kind of caught my attention because removing pesticides was such a huge part of the carbon chemistry
Mm-hmm.
process. But yeah, out in Oklahoma, I just found out it's illegal to remove pesticides from cannabis extracts.
Really? Why's that? That doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't make any sense. I think it's because they don't want people maybe cleaning bad material. I don't know. It seems like the whole thing's kind of a hustle to destroy material, if you ask me.
Okay.
But yeah, I think they just don't want people cleaning up bad stuff. If it's bad, they don't want to trust you to clean it or something. I don't. There's something there.
So they
Everybody
don't
I
have like
talk
a
to,
pathway for remediation.
if it's hot, it's hot. And
Okay.
unfortunately, as you might know, you can have clean flour that comes back hot
Yeah.
in extract because it concentrates,
Yep.
right? So, and then a lot of the states like that, they don't have any recourse. So if somebody sells you 500 pounds of material that ends up being hot, like you
Right. You
just shit's
can't
creek.
return
So,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, that's too
But
bad.
yeah, that's a hopefully there's clearer heads that prevail there, because we do have the technology, we do have the techniques.
Yep.
Max Hill is expensive, but when you go to the process and you break it down per gram, it's like on average less than 20 cents per gram of going from something that might have had to be destroyed to something that's a clean product. So
Yeah, it makes no sense not to remediate it.
right, so that's why active filtration isn't going anywhere. Uh, you'll always be able to manipulate your product stream to create a better product if it didn't come out the way you wanted it. If it comes out perfect first try, you don't need me. I mean, congratulations. That's where we want everybody to be. But you know, things happen, and you know, if you can take something that would have been a huge loss and turn it into a big win, you know, that's where the stuff I've been involved in shines. So.
For sure. So if someone's looking to kind of learn more about active filtration or maybe reach out to you, where's the best way that they could do that?
So Shadownaught on Instagram is the main place to go for me. You can send me a DM there. But then Future 4200, I would use the search bar. Don't necessarily just scroll. There's a lot going on there, and you can get lost real fast. So I'd say use the search bar. Look for some of the historical documents that we've put up. We've put up pesticide remediation. We've had conversations about all kinds of different things regarding pigment, oxidation products, all that kind of stuff. There's a huge amount of resources there. But yeah, there, and then the Solvent Direct team. You know, I'm currently spending a lot of time making sure that the client base has whatever help and support that they need to pick products and develop their their active filtration needs. So
Nice. I love hearing that you're working with Solvent Direct too. I can't say enough good things about Lex. He did a lot for the Cannabis Club and just really supported the university when I was really kind of more involved with that. But really good company, and can't say enough good things about him. So stoked to see that you're working with him.
there's a lot of great people in this industry. You know, like Stephanie and the team from XD and the folks over at Media Bros. You know, it's this is a market segment. We're a community of suppliers supporting a community of operators who are supporting a community of consumers. I mean, it's the military phrase that I like to use as a hashtag is one team, one fight. You know, we might be competing for customers, we might be competing for dollars, but at the end of the day, we're all part of one organism, and we're trying to make things better.
No, I definitely agree, and it shows. I mean, Lex, he kind of like went out of his way to try to work with the university to do research on just how to get a more clean and better product, better solvent. So, as a chemist, like I can respect that.
His laser focus on dealing with tank contamination issues, supply chain issues with butane,
Yeah,
tank cleanliness. I mean, the dude he's unstoppable. Like,
yep.
and now he's got a kid. I mean, it's incredible. It's
awesome.
Honestly, seeing him and all of that he accomplishes makes me exhausted.
I can imagine. Well, is there anything else you want to add before we wrap this up? We're getting right near the hour mark.
It's a pleasure to link up with you, and
Likewise.
we could easily drag some people on and create a series. There's so many cool stories and personalities out there. Yeah.
I need to get back into doing content. I've been kind of on this like little lull for the past couple months. So this was like a really good opportunity to get my ass back in gear. So I was stoked to have you on and to be able to kind of just nerd out on concentrates for a little bit. And
Yeah.
yeah, really always kind of respected the Future 4200 gain and Good Life gain early founders. So it was cool hearing that you were kind of a part of the early community there too. And just really appreciate all the wealth of knowledge that you've contributed to the community.
Appreciate that, and thank you for everything you do, man.
Yeah.
Whether it's operating in Michigan or spreading awareness through a podcast, or I mean, hell, I was going back through my follows and stuff like that, and started going through your content, and I was like, this is great. We got to do something. So
Yeah.
let's see what we can turn it into, man.